Welcome to our channel, where the stories of people from different eras and professions come to life. We are in magnificent Ephesus, right by the sea, where the great temple of Artemis reaches toward the heavens, and ships from all over the world fill the harbor. Subscribe, and after listening, be sure to share your impressions in the comments.
The road rarely led only to fairs and market squares. In the beginning of his fourth decade, Elias more and more often heard the distant rumble of war, though he himself had never raised a sword. Rumors of raids reached every crossroads. Some spoke of a knight fallen on foreign soil, others of a crusade calling young men to distant lands. In every town there was a storyteller who knew more than his neighbor, but no voice held the full truth. Elias and his young apprentice Lucas absorbed these voices. In markets they heard of villages burned in border skirmishes. In taverns, of knights who had left their castles for foreign crosses. Along the roads, the laments of women who had lost their husbands. All this accumulated in his memory and demanded release. In one small town, where people had gathered for a harvest festival stripped of joy, Elias first dared to touch a theme far from laughter and love. The crowd expected the usual satire or playful dance, but he took out his rebec and began quietly, almost in a whisper. Then he moved into song. It was about a knight who had gone on campaign and never returned. Not about one specific man, but about any and every. In his words, there was no heroic pathos, only the longing of a wife and children, the waiting for someone who would never come home again. Instead of ringing trumpets and victorious cries, his ballad carried the quiet chord of loss. At first, the audience was silent, perplexed, but gradually faces softened. A woman by the fence covered her head with a shawl. Someone looked away. A man in the crowd tightly squeezed his son's hand. When the song ended, the silence hung in the air for so long that Elias understood for the first time, silence too can be applause. This ballad quickly spread among the people. People picked up the simple words and repeated them on the roads, adding their own verses. Somewhere the knight died on foreign soil, somewhere in a forest ambush, somewhere on a bridge by the river. The plot changed, but the core remained. A song about how war takes both victors and vanquished alike. For young Lucas, this became a revelation. One evening by the fire, he whispered, "I thought songs should entertain, but your ballad made everyone think about what they fear." Elias replied, "Sometimes a song does not comfort, but speaks the truth. It is harder, but more necessary." Thus, a new turning point began in his life. He now understood that song could not only feed and gladden, but also preserve the memory of pain. It became the continuation of the fate of those who never returned home. And with this came a new sense of responsibility. Every word could become a contribution to the common story, a memory of people whose names would otherwise vanish without trace. On the roads, he heard more and more about the Crusades. Young men were led away to distant lands with promises of heavenly reward. He saw families seeing them off with anxiety and tried to look into the eyes of the mothers to understand what they felt. In their gazes, there was no delight, only the expectation of misfortune. All this he absorbed, knowing that one day it would be turned into new verses. Life itself remained earthly. Meager food on the road, soft bread when he managed to earn it, or stew for a few couplets. But now every performance felt weightier. The audience waited not only for entertainment, but for revelation. Even in the tavern, someone would ask, "Sing about that knight who never returned." The ballad, born from rumors and longing, began to live its own life, as if it no longer belonged entirely to the author. For Elias, this became another step toward maturity. If earlier he had seen himself as a collector of others' stories or a messenger, now he was becoming a keeper of memory. His songs began to carry the traces of generations, not childish amusements or chance tales, but something that would remain in hearts for a long time. After months of heavy songs about war, longing, and loss, life itself seemed to remind Elias that the world also held another beginning, quiet, warm, and giving strength no less than bread. This turn was not loud or fateful, yet it left a lasting mark on his heart, like morning light that lingers in memory even on the darkest night. It happened in a small village along the southern road. Elias and young Lucas stopped there for a fair. People streamed toward the square, bringing wool, grain, and cloth. There, for the first time, he noticed her, a weaver girl named Clara, laying out colorful pieces of fabric on her stall. She stood out from the others. She did not shout or argue, but sat calmly, running her hand over even threads. In her movements was the same rhythm that lived in his songs, steady repetition and quiet harmony. He approached, first speaking of the cloth, then of the people bustling around. She answered with restraint, but a soft smile at the corners of her lips gave her words warmth. In the evening, when the fires on the square died down and only guards and rare passers-by remained, they met again. Elias sang for her a quiet song, not about knights or war, but about the pattern on fabric that a weaver creates in the same way a singer weaves words into melody. Imagine that moment. A man accustomed to crowds now sang for one person. For the first time in many years, his voice sounded as if every note was a confession. She listened, head slightly tilted. Her hands, used to working with threads, stopped, and on her face appeared a rare, genuine lightness that needed no words. The next morning they met again, this time near her house. It was a simple hut, smelling of herbs, dried flax, and fried flatbread. She treated both him and Lucas, and Elias noted that simple food in her home tasted better than many feasts. They spoke little, but every word felt full. These meetings continued for several days until the end of the fair. He told her about the road and how people's faces changed from north to south. She shared, simply, about her father's death, leaving the family without support, and how she had to work day and night to make ends meet. Yet there was no despair in her voice, only quiet determination, as if the habit of weaving had made her soul strong too. For Lucas, this seemed like a miracle. He whispered by the fire one evening, "She looks at you the way we look at fire in the cold." Elias himself felt in her eyes not passion or storm, but even warmth that he had so lacked on the road. But the road does not leave anyone for long. The fair ended, and it was time to move on. He understood his life was wandering. She understood hers was home, the loom, and family she could not leave. They parted without loud words. She only gave him a small piece of cloth with a restrained pattern, a gift in which every thread was invested with the same care he put into his songs. From that day, he carried this scrap with him, carefully keeping it in his bag. Whenever life seemed especially harsh, he would take out the cloth and look at the pattern. It was not a symbol of unfulfilled love, but a reminder that light and kindness remain in the world, even when the road is full of trials. Soon, a new song was born from this memory, not directly about Clara, but about how even in dark times, people intertwine the threads of fate for the future. It sounded like a ballad about a simple woman whose work makes the world warmer, and about a wanderer who carries her pattern as he walks into the distance. In every performance, he saw how the eyes of women and men filled with special light. They recognized themselves in this story. This song became the opposite of his earlier ballad about war. There was the ringing of losses. Here, the rustle of hope. There he spoke of death, here of life. And it was in this duality that he first felt his art had become whole. He could speak both of pain and of comfort. With the years, the road changed its geography. If earlier Elias had wandered the northern lands, where fields gave way to forests and misty taverns, now the path led him and Lucas southward. The journey to Provence felt like a passage into another world, from the harsh northern winds to songs filled with southern light. Upon arriving in these lands, he immediately noticed that the speech of the people itself sounded like music. Words heard in markets were softer, more melodious, with unfamiliar endings. This was the Occitan language. Even when he did not fully understand the meaning, the rhythm itself was captivating. People here loved to sing as naturally as they breathed. Songs rang out on streets, in taverns, and in the fields. His attention was drawn to the troubadours. Those whom people in the north simply called wandering singers had a different appearance here. Troubadours carried themselves with greater dignity. They composed not only for bread, but for high poetry. Their ballads were devoted to refined love, subtle passions, and nobility. Unlike the stern songs of war or joking market tunes, they spoke words that lifted listeners above everyday life. Imagine a square near a monastery in Provence. Warm air, wine poured from clay jugs, laughter and joy, and amid it all, the voice of a troubadour. His words flowed smoothly and tenderly. The music did not overpower the person, but accompanied him. Sun-tanned and well-dressed people picked up the refrain, turning the square into a single breath. At first, Elias felt like a stranger. His songs, though coming from the heart, remained straightforward stories about peasant life, war, and hope. Here the focus was on delicate love and elevated feelings. Yet this very difference captivated him. He listened and understood that these lines contained something his own ballads had lacked. He spent long hours talking with troubadours by the fires. They explained that a song could not only carry news, but also invite a person to look higher, toward the light within the soul. When a peasant hears you sing about bread, he thinks of his land, they said. When he hears a song about love, he thinks of what he lacks in life, and this awakens the heart, even if he cannot express it. These words sank deep. For the first time, Elias clearly saw that a song should connect the low and the high, not only tell of what hurts right now, but also lift the listener's gaze to what he does not yet realize. Lucas absorbed the new knowledge too. At first, he grumbled, "What use is that? People want news of war, or at least laughter in times of trouble." But then he himself heard a troubadour's song about unattainable love for a lady, and his face changed. That evening he confessed, "I didn't understand all the words, but my heart felt lighter." Provence became a true school for Elias. He tried building his songs differently, introducing long flowing lines, adding rhythms he had not known before. Sometimes audiences in the north, hearing such tunes, were surprised. Too long, why so complicated? But he felt his music was growing and gaining depth. An important memory remained from a fair on the border where singers from different lands met. There he heard the first words in Latinized Occitan and saw how one and the same song could pass from language to language, changing only its sound but preserving its spirit. In that moment, he felt himself part of something greater, music that united lands where people breathed different air yet hoped for the same. He carried with him memories of the weaver Clara. In the southern lands, they came alive especially brightly. When he listened to the troubadour's delicate melodies of love, he saw her hands moving over the threads. Perhaps it was because of this that his new songs united two worlds, simple, earthly closeness and the refined longing of southern motifs. The road in Provence brought him not wealth, but new colors for his song palette. The north had given him severity, war, and the reality of daily bread. The South gave him light sadness and the poetry of elevated lines. And in this union, a new stage of his art was born. Now he felt himself not only a singer of news, but also a singer of the heart. After many enriching months in the South, the road turned Elias and Lucas back toward the north. The air grew cooler, the forests denser, and the fields stricter. Places where he had once sung his first ballads now looked different. Clear traces of wars and misfortunes were visible, crooked huts, fields left untended, and a heavy silence in villages that once rang with laughter. The return became a test for memory. He had hoped to meet familiar faces, but found silence instead. In one village, where he had first sung for a piece of cheese in his youth, only a few smoking huts remained. The rest had been destroyed by fire. People met him not with joy, but with tired eyes. He sang, yet instead of gratitude, he saw only empty, exhausted gazes, burdened by recent hardships. In one small settlement, he met a boy of about 10. The child sat by the road, clutching a small bag that held nothing but a piece of old cloth. His face was thin, his eyes huge, his hair tangled by the wind. Lucas wanted to walk past, but Elias stopped. He asked where the boy's family was. The child answered briefly, "Illness took them. I am alone." His eyes were dry, as if he had already forgotten how to cry. This sight needed no songs of knights. Action was required. Elias extended his hand and said, "Come with us." Now 3 travelers walked the road: the teacher, the apprentice, and the new companion. At first the boy spoke almost nothing, only walked stubbornly clutching his poor bag. Only in the evenings by the fire, when Elias sang quiet melodies of hope, did the child begin to listen and whisper along softly. Elias understood that road life was no place for such a child. He needed shelter, not endless wandering. When they reached a monastery, he turned to the brothers with a request. "Take him in, let him be fed and alive here." The monks accepted the boy, fed him, and for the first time in a long while, a weak spark appeared in his eyes. For Elias himself, this became an important experience. He remembered his own childhood, lonely games by the hearth, the first strikes of a stick on a barrel, and realized his fate could have been the same if no one had offered a word of support at the right moment. Now he was returning to the world what he had once received from the gifts of fate. The journey through the northern lands continued with difficulty. Behind every road lay new emptiness. Where he had once performed in taverns, the halls were now burned. Markets brought less profit. People lived poorer, guarding what little they still had. Yet precisely now, they listened to songs of love and hope with greater hunger than when he had first performed them. Voices about light are needed most when darkness reigns in the world. The teacher sang, the apprentice repeated after him, and somewhere in the monastery, the orphan they had met perhaps began to hum along with the morning psalms. The thought warmed him on the road. Even without him, these sounds might continue to live. Returning home was not about the joy of recognition, but about understanding. Everything flows, changes, much disappears. But in this, Elias saw a new purpose: to preserve memory. His songs were now not only about hope and love, but also about the strength to survive without losing one's humanity. By night, looking at the light of the campfire, he understood. Southern melodies had taught him refined sadness, but the wounded north had made room in him for quiet compassion. And perhaps it was in this combination that his art found wholeness. As the years went on, the road taught Elias more and more about the fragility of human life. At 20, he had seen it as freedom. Now, at 36, he saw it as a long trial filled with many shadows. Unfamiliar sounds troubled his heart more often than he wished. Since childhood, he had heard peasant tales of unclean forces, and although reason told him much was only imagination, at night, belief in those stories came alive stronger than any logic. One day, the path led him and Lucas deep into the forest, and night overtook them far from any dwelling. They were tired, their feet slipped on roots, and the air was heavy and damp. No village appeared, so they had to seek shelter. They came upon an old chapel, half ruined, forgotten by time, standing on the edge of the road. Local peasants avoided it, believing it to be the dwelling place of restless souls. But there was no choice. Darkness thickened, and wolves howled nearby. Imagine vaults without a roof, walls eaten by moss, a cross missing its top, cracks in the windows through which the wind wandered freely. Here they lit a small fire from branches of a fallen oak. Shadows danced on the stones, and every rustle echoed as if someone walked beside them. Lucas was afraid. He whispered, "Teacher, perhaps we should go on, even in the dark." But Elias answered, "When it is frightening, we do not run. We stay and listen. Otherwise, fear becomes our master." These words were perhaps spoken as much for himself as for the boy. During the night, the branches creaked as if someone whispered prayers above their heads. Sometimes it seemed footsteps approached along the broken slabs. Elias held his rebec tighter like a talisman. He began to play quietly, at first uncertainly, then more firmly. The strings, though sounding with interruptions, still filled the space with a special ringing, and the silence of the forest gradually yielded to these simple chords. Superstitions of that era were strong. People believed music drove away evil spirits. Without realizing it, Elias acted as a continuer of an ancient rite. For Lucas, this became a miracle. Where there had been terrifying empty echoes, the voice of the rebec turned the night into a place that was still disturbing, but bearable. Yet deep in his heart, Elias himself did not hide his fear. Listening carefully, he separated the wind from what might be a footstep. Before his eyes rose village tales of wanderers who spent the night in forest chapels and vanished forever. He felt the cold breath of those stories, but continued to sing as if seeking protection in the music itself. Toward morning, the fire had almost died out. The darkness still held, but the first lines of dawn broke through the cracks in the walls. Elias noticed that his heart beat calmer, as if the very fact that they had endured the night in a place feared by the entire district proved fears are strong only when you run from them. Coming outside, they saw the forest fresh and quiet. Lucas sighed with joy at seeing the light. Elias noticed an old stone at the chapel threshold. On it was a barely visible sign, almost erased by time. No one remembered anymore whose temple this had been or what prayers had been spoken there. But one thought remained. Everything people build may be destroyed, but a song endures. Even the night with its ghosts could not silence it. This night became a special lesson for him. He understood that superstitions exist not to keep people in constant fear, but to remind them man is weak, and therefore seeks strength in prayer and song. Later, his ballad about the night in the abandoned chapel entered his repertoire. In it, he did not tell of ghosts, but of how music can turn darkness into light and cold wind into the breath of hope. After the night in the ruined chapel and long journeys along damp roads, life granted Elias and Lucas moments of rest and rare warmth. He felt these simple pleasures especially keenly now, because he knew the true price of darkness and cold. One day, they entered a village just on the day of a wedding. People had gathered on the square, and everyone from young to old wanted to see the celebration. The groom stood in his best embroidered shirt, the bride in a wreath of wildflowers. On long tables steamed simple dishes, cabbage stew, bread, and jugs of wine from the nearby monastery. There was no luxury, but everything shone with joy. The villagers immediately invited the travelers to join. Sing, wanderers, let the day become even happier." Elias took out his instrument and chose a light, cheerful melody with simple words that everyone could pick up. The crowd joined in. Men clapped their hands, women laughed, children ran around. The wedding feast turned into one great shared song in which everyone found their place. Imagine the whole square filled with the light of torches, the smell of fresh flatbreads, the clink of clay mugs. The strings sounded, and even those who usually listened warily now let go of all cares. It seemed life itself gave a brief respite, allowing people to forget about wars, taxes, and cold for a moment. For Elias, this moment was special. He knew that the next day, life would bring new worries again. But right now, sitting by the fire and warming his hands, he saw that happiness lies not in lavish halls or rich gifts, but here, in a peasant's smile, a child's laughter, in the warmth when people share even their last with strangers. For Lucas, the holiday became a lesson. Music is not only serious ballads, but also the joy of shared words. He eagerly joined the tune, added his own verses, and the adults accepted his play as a sign of the future. The wedding lasted until morning. When the first light touched the roofs, Elias suddenly realized he still feared joy, as if every bright moment was too brief, like a spark from the fire. But together with this fear came gratitude. Let the spark be short, yet in it burns what is worth singing for. This was not the only manifestation of small comforts. After the wedding, he noticed more often a small piece of bread when hungry, the chance to lean against a warm wall after a long journey, the smile of a woman who gave him food without extra words. All this began to seem more precious than any coins. He started to understand that happiness hides not in great deeds, but in little things. The taste of hot bread, the smell of smoke from a campfire, a child's smile with flowers in her hands. As Elias grew older, he saw more clearly. People live not in miracles, but in the small. They grow tired, rejoice, feed children, celebrate weddings, and bury loved ones. It is in these movements that the essence of songs is hidden. Therefore, he now more often turned not to invented nights, but to ordinary people, seeing their value and reflecting it in his melodies. At the same time, the road became not only a trial, but also a bridge along which others began to follow him. If before only Lucas walked beside him, now on the tracts other young men began to listen. His songs spread from village to village, and people often repeated, "There is that singer who teaches the young." In one village, he stayed for several days. There he was already known. 3 boys paid him special attention. In the evening, they watched how he took the instrument, how his fingers glided over the strings. At first, they were shy, but then they approached and began repeating the movements in the air as if holding their own rebec. Around the campfire, with peasants watching, 3 young faces eagerly caught every note. For Elias, this was like a reflection of himself, the boy by the hearth who once tapped a stick on a barrel. In that moment, he understood he had become for someone what a chance singer at the fair had once been for him. He began teaching them simple things: how to tune the voice so the neighbor could hear, how to find rhythm in one's own breathing, how to choose words that lay on the ear like bread in the palm. Life in the village flowed in its usual rhythm. In the mornings, people plowed. In the evenings, they gathered around the fire. And in this simple existence, a small circle of young imitators appeared, trying to compose their first lines. Sometimes the verses were clumsy, the rhythm faltered, the notes broke, and people laughed. But Elias supported them, explaining that every unsuccessful couplet contains the seed of a future song. One unforgettable evening, one of the boys dared to perform his own little song. It was very simple, about an apple tree by the house and spring that always returns. People listened attentively and then applauded with laughter and slaps on their knees. In the boy's eyes, the same light kindled that had once appeared in Lucas's eyes long ago. Elias sat nearby and felt he had become part of the chain. His songs now lived not only on his lips, but were reflected in the voices of a new generation. This thought warmed his heart. For the essence of art is not to sound loudly, but to continue, to pass from mouth to mouth like a thread that does not break. As the years passed, the wandering minstrel's path led him more often not only to markets and villages, but also to the walls of monasteries. In his youth, these walls had seemed inaccessible, stern, closed and cold. Now he saw in them a welcome for those who came with song and kind word. Many monasteries kept their doors open, at least for a short time. Every traveler was entitled to a bowl of stew and a place by the fire. Especially at the age of 40, he noticed that monasteries listened to his songs differently than lay people. If at weddings and fairs the audience waited for laughter and merriment, the monks listened more deeply, as if the sound of music helped open yet another prayer. Sometimes he played before the refectory, sometimes in the courtyard. Then his simple, almost rural melodies suddenly gained the power of a sermon. In one such monastery, he met a monk named Arnulf, a man no longer young, with a gentle gaze and clear voice. After the performance, the monk approached Elias and said, "You play as if you are seeking not only listeners, but answers for yourself as well." These words touched him because they held truth. In the evening, sitting in a modest cell, they spoke of music and word. The monk said, "People often think prayer is only words, but is not the melody of a bird itself a praise to the Creator? Music is also prayer, only of a different kind." Elias replied, "Then even my songs about village bread and love are also prayer?" "Of course," said Arnulf, "for every song that carries light supports souls." These words became a revelation for him. Earlier, he had considered his art something separate: fairs, weddings, taverns. Now he felt that all of it was part of one whole, connecting hearts, whether through laughter or light sadness. Lucas remembered the conversation too. Later he said, "I thought songs were needed only for food, but it turns out they are needed for the soul as well." From then on, the young man treated the ballads of hope more attentively, singing them softer, quieter, more trustingly. In the monasteries, Elias also encountered different attitudes. Some brothers accepted his songs with joy and asked him to stay longer. Others looked with suspicion. Were the plots too free? Was there mockery of the church in his tunes? In such places, he chose especially careful words, giving them the form of a hymn or prayer so as not to provoke anger. In this period, he noticed a change in himself. More and more often, his songs became quiet and deep. If earlier they laughed at merchants or wept with the ballad of the night, now they sounded like reminders. Even in fragile human life, there is a reflection of the eternal. He sang of how the sun rises over a rye field, of how a child laughs by the fire, of how a mother divides bread. And in these simple images, people heard more than just a song. They heard hope. Rarely does a wanderer return to the place from which he began his journey. But the years and memory drew Elias northward again, to the lands where his first song about spring had sounded, and where old Gregory had once handed him the old rebec. He was 43 now, and the road led him not for glory or bread, but for a backward glance, for an attempt to understand what remained of the world that had once been his home. He walked slowly, with stops, as if afraid to approach the past too quickly. Songs accompanied him on the way. Now they sounded calmer, more philosophical. If earlier he had sought approval, now he simply let the melody be. Lucas walked beside him, already a mature young man with a strong and clear voice like spring water. Sometimes the apprentice himself performed, and one could hear in his singing both the echo of the teacher and fresh independence. The landscape became more and more familiar. The same forests where he had once gathered kindling, the fields over which larks had flown in his youth. But with the years, everything had changed. Villages looked poorer, huts leaned crookedly, many yards had empty fences. Taxes and wars had done their work, and the land that once rang with children's voices was now more often silent. When he entered the village of his childhood, his heart clenched. He searched the faces of passers-by for familiar features, but found only strangers' eyes. Those he remembered were long gone. His parents, old Gregory, even the neighbors who had once laughed at his singing. The hut where he was born stood empty, with a rotten roof and weeds at the threshold. Imagine returning to a place where every corner was known and seeing not a home, but ruins. He wanted to play something bright, but his fingers would not obey. He sat silently in front of the old hut, looking at the crooked wall, and only the wind stirred the strings in his hands. People looked at him warily, a stranger with an instrument wandering the streets. No one recognized in him the barefoot boy who had once run through these gardens. At first, this saddened him, but then came a strange relief. There was nothing left to hold here. In the evening, Lucas asked, "Is really nothing left?" Elias answered, "Everything that we carry in memory remains. Walls rot, people leave, but the song lives." He began to sing right on the street, not for the crowd, but for the place itself. A ballad about childhood, about the smell of bread in the oven, about Grandfather Gregory telling tales. No one understood what his words were about, but an old man by the well nodded and said, "It sounds as if someone is remembering times long past." In that moment he realized, even if no one around knows his past, the earth itself hears. In the following days he performed for the villagers just as he did for any others, but in every tune there was a hidden conversation with himself. He played not because he expected a coin, but because he wanted to connect his past with the present. And in these sounds he made peace with the fact that people forget, houses crumble, and the only legacy is that which is carried in words and melodies. Sometimes, walking along familiar paths, he stopped by old stones where he had once sat as a boy. The wind was the same, the rustle of leaves the same, but now he heard them differently. In every sound, he sought not the child he had been, but the trace of what that child had become, the road of the minstrel. Thus, the return turned out to be neither a holiday nor pure sorrow, but a lesson. The past cannot be a home. It can only become memory and song. And in this, he found consolation. Even if people had forgotten his face, they would still sing his lines, not knowing who had composed them. Evening descended quietly, no different from many other evenings spent on the road. Yet this evening held special meaning. Elias sat by a small campfire, wrapped in his cloak, gazing into the flames. He was about 45 years old, and he felt that the path full of wanderings was approaching its completion. Not the end of life, but the end of endless roaming in the old sense. His heart had changed. It no longer sought adventures, but meaning. Nearby slept his longtime apprentice, Lucas, now a grown man, independent, with a voice strong and clear as spring water. Sometimes the young man took on the role of singer at fairs, while Elias watched from the side, just as he had once watched others. Everything repeated like a circle. Apprenticeship, the road, the passing on of songs. In his hands he held the rebec, the very same one old Gregory had given him long ago. The wood had dried out, the strings had lost some of their ring, but a warm sound still lived within it. This instrument had been his companion for 27 years. With it, he had endured wars, weddings, monasteries, and fairs. Now he gently ran his fingers across the strings and heard not only notes, but the entire road he had traveled. Imagine this moment. A man sits by the fire, and in the crackling of the flames, he hears the voices of everyone he had ever met. The laughter of peasants at a wedding, the tears of a woman in the castle, the voice of the monk Arnulf in the monastery, the Occitan tunes of troubadours, the child's laughter of the orphan he had helped. All this sounded together with his melody like an invisible choir. He thought about how little people leave behind. Peasants leave the land that another will plough. Craftsmen leave things that will soon wear out. And what does a minstrel leave? Only words and sounds, recorded neither in books nor in stone. Yet that was precisely their meaning. They went out to people, becoming their memory. And if tomorrow he himself were gone, the songs would live as long as someone repeated them by the fire. He remembered the words of monk Arnulf. Music is also prayer. Then he understood. His road had been a prayer, not one read from a book, but one spoken with a living voice. Every ballad about bread, about war, about love, about hope, had been a conversation not only with people, but with eternity. And it was in this that he found consolation. The apprentices he had met, the boys from the villages, they were probably already singing their lines in other lands. His first apprentice, Lucas, had now become a master, capable of leading crowds, and others would follow them. The chain would not break. He raised his eyes to the stars. The road that had stretched beneath them all his life now appeared to him not as an endless path, but as a pattern. Every step, every campfire, every song was part of this pattern. And in this pattern, there was no emptiness. Even fears and hunger were woven into it, because it was from them that the melodies were born that once warmed others. Lucas woke up and asked, "Teacher, what are you thinking about?" Elias smiled and replied, "About the fact that the road never ends. As long as the song sounds, we walk." The wind scattered sparks from the campfire, carrying them into the dark sky, and he felt a symbol in this. Every spark was like his song. It rises, may disappear in a moment, but while it burns, it illuminates the darkness and warms those nearby. Some sparks may go out, but others will light new fires, and that is enough. That night, he played for a long time until the stars faded. He sang not for the audience, but for himself, for the earth, for the chance to hear his own road once more in the melody. His voice merged with the fire, with the wind, with the whisper of the forest. And inside, there was neither longing nor pity, only calm and clarity. The life of the wandering minstrel was completing its circle. It had begun in a clay hut with the smell of bread, passed through markets, castles, forests and monasteries, and returned to the fire. And this was not an end, but a continuation, for his songs already lived their own lives. The life of the wandering minstrel had come full circle. Begun in a clay hut filled with the smell of fresh bread, it had passed through noisy markets, proud castles, dark forests, and quiet monasteries, only to return once more to the simple fire under the open sky. Elias sat with the old rebec in his hands, feeling calm clarity wash over him. The circle was complete. Lucas, now a true master of the craft, watched his teacher with quiet respect. The songs they had shared would continue their journey through other voices and other roads. The chain of memory and melody would not break. Elias understood that a minstrel leaves behind not stone monuments or gold, but living words that warm hearts long after the singer himself has gone. This was enough. This was everything. He played one last long melody that night, not for any audience, but for the earth, the stars, and the road itself. His voice merged with the crackling fire, the wind in the trees, and the distant call of night birds. There was no sorrow in it, only deep gratitude for every step, every meeting, every note that had shaped his unusual fate. Yet as the final notes faded into the darkness, an unexpected twist revealed itself, one that Elias had never foreseen. In the morning, when the first light touched the horizon, a small group of travelers approached their campfire. Among them was a young woman with a familiar, gentle smile and hands that still moved as if tracing invisible threads. It was Clara, the weaver from that distant southern fair, now older, but with the same quiet light in her eyes. She had followed the paths of his songs for years, village to village, until the melodies themselves had guided her here. But that was not all. In her arms she held a small child, a boy whose eyes shone with the same spark Elias had once seen in himself as a child by the hearth. The boy reached out toward the old rebec with tiny hands, as if he already knew the instrument's voice. At that moment, Elias understood the greatest truth of his wandering life. The road had never been only his own. It had been preparing this quiet, unexpected return, not to the ruined heart of his childhood, but to a new beginning woven from all the threads he had carried with him. The songs, the losses, the hopes, the small joys, everything had led not to an end, but to this living continuation, sitting by the morning fire. He smiled, handed the rebec to the boy, and for the first time in many years, felt that the road had truly come home.